Hello, my lovely humans. Today we're going to be learning about rotations in the coordinate plane. So rotations follow a pattern by default. They default, first of all, to going counterclockwise, which means they usually rotate this way. Here would be 0 degrees, here would be 90 degrees, here would be 180, here would be 270, and the 0 degrees is also the same thing as 360 degrees. So just for reference, you always start here and then go left counterclockwise. And they also follow the pattern. If you're going 0 degrees, so you're not moving at all, you have your point at x comma y. If you're going 90 degrees, your point moves to negative y comma x. If you're going 180 degrees, your point goes to negative x comma negative y. 270 goes to y negative x, and 360, or a full circle, goes back to that original point like that. See how they're the same point? That's because if you turn 360 degrees, you're facing the same way. Now this pattern is a little tricky at first, but there is a trick to remember it. If you start at 0, label it xy, and you move the back one, the y, to the front, and you change the sign, it becomes negative y x. If you do the same thing for 90, you move the back one to the front and change the sign, positive x will turn into negative x, and negative y goes there. Same thing for 180. If you move the back one to the front and change the sign, it turns into a positive y, and you still have negative x. And lastly, moving the back one to the front, changing the sign turns it into positive x comma y. So anytime you struggle with the formula, just remember every 90-degree addition, you move the back part to the front and change its sign. So let's practice this. First, we're going to go over the notation for a little bit. So the notation is denoted with a little r. This has to be lowercase. So lowercase r. The next thing in the parentheses tells you the degrees turn. And the last part tells you what you're rotating about. By default, we rotate about the origin. So this O means origin. All right, so it says rotate 90 degrees about the origin. So you remember a 90-degree turn followed the pattern negative y comma x. So P is originally at 2 comma 1. So if we label these x and y, your x value is 2, your y value is 1. Therefore, negative y would be a negative 1, and x would just be 2. We go to negative 1 comma 2 and graph that point. Beautiful. Q is originally at 3 comma 6. We label these again as x and y. We want to change it into negative y comma x. If y is 6, negative y will be negative 6, and x stays as 3. So then we go to negative 6 comma 3. Put a dot there. Lastly, we have r started at 6 comma 7. If we're going to change this from x and y to negative y negative x, we must change the 7 to a negative 7 and put a 6. So we go negative 7 up 6, and we're right there. Let me do this one real fast. Woohoo! And I should have been labeling these. I apologize. This should be P1, Q prime, R prime. There you go. And you are done. Now another way you might see it is you might have this negative degree. So you're rotating negative 90. So if you remember when we started this, we say we start here and go this way. So if we're going negative 90, that means we're going to go the opposite direction. So now instead of going counterclockwise, we're going to go clockwise 90. We're going to go to here, which if you notice is the same thing as going 270 degrees counterclockwise. So if it's negative, you add 360 until it's positive to see the rotation that you're actually doing. Now the pattern for 270 degrees was y comma negative x. So let's look at what we already have. We have A starts at negative 7 comma 1. Okay, so we would want to change this into y comma negative x. So y is 1, negative x will be positive 7. Let's change this color real fast. 1. All right, next you have b. b starts at, let's see, negative 4, comma 7. So you want to change it into y comma negative x. Your y value is 7. Your negative x value will be positive 4. So you go 7, 1, 2, 3, 7, up 4. All right, so this would be b prime. This one was a prime. All right, c was originally at negative 2, comma 3. Label it as x and y. If y was 3, then we keep y as 3. X was negative 2, so negative x would be positive 2. And then we go to 3, comma 2. Label that as c prime. And lastly, d was originally at negative 3, comma 1. Label it xy. Y will still stay as 1, and negative x will turn into a positive 3. So we go 1, 3, prime, and then we just connect. Beautiful. Look at that. If you are academic, you may stop watching this video. If you are pre-AP, we have one more example to go over. All right, so what we just worked on was rotating a point around the origin, but you might have to rotate around a point that is not the origin, and this has 3 steps. Your first step is you subtract out the point of rotation from your given points. Then you would rotate as you would around the origin. So on this step, you're going to be using the formula again. You're going to be using that formula we gave at the beginning of the presentation. Then, after you've done that rotation, you're going to add the point of rotation back to each point. So it seems a little tricky, but as you'll see, it's not too bad. So let's try one example. We're going to rotate triangle ABC 270 degrees clockwise, which, if you'll recall, we don't usually go clockwise, so this is the same thing as 90 degrees counterclockwise. So we're actually rotating it 90 degrees counterclockwise. Around the point 2, comma 0. We start with A is at 0, 3. Your first step is to subtract out the original point. So we're going to subtract out that 2 and that 0, and it turns into negative 2, 3. Then we go, okay, what was the formula for 90 degrees? 90 degrees, remember, was negative y comma x. So if negative 2 is your x and 3 is your y, then a prime will be at negative y comma x, or negative 3, negative 2. And then the last step, don't forget, was to add that point of rotation back in. So now we're going to add the 2, add the 0, and you get negative 1, negative 2. So we're going to go to negative 1, negative 2, put a point right there, call that A prime. All right, that was a lot of steps. I know it's a little bit tricky, so let's do it again with point B. B was originally at negative 4, comma 0. Part 1 says subtract out that point you're rotating about. Subtract out the 2, subtract out the 0. You're now at negative 6, 0. Then you're going to change x and y into negative y, negative x. So 0, negative 6. Cool, that's pretty straightforward. And lastly, again, we add that point back in. It turns into 2, negative 6. So we go to 2, we go to negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And put B prime right there. And lastly, point C starts at 0, comma negative 1. Step 1, subtract out that point, subtract out the 2 and the 0, brings you to negative 2, negative 1. Then you change x and y into negative yx, so negative y will become positive 1, and x will be negative 2. Then you need to add that point back in, so we add the 2, add the 0, and we are at 3, negative 2. We go to 3, we go to negative 2, we put our dot, C prime. Connect your 3 points, and there is your rotated triangle. Now let's graph our original triangle and see if this looks similar. We were at 0, 3 originally for A. We're at -4, 0 for B. And we're at 0, -1 for C. I was very bad at drawing that, my bad. There we go. All right, cool. And it rotated about the point 2, 0. So if you see, it does kind of look like we took this and rotated it that way. Pretty neat. All right, let me know if you guys have any questions.